Hello, everyone. If you're here, you're one of the real ones. The ones that know that kids do not just learn money from what we teach, they learn it from what they watch, feel, and hear at home. Parents are having money conversations with their kids, whether they realize it or not. Sometimes it's through the way they say things, sometimes it's through what they avoid, sometimes it's through stress. It could be silence, spending patterns, generosity, conflict, or just the way we respond when our child asks for something. And in a world where kids are surrounded by comparison, excess, and instant access, many parents are trying to figure out how to raise grounded kids without using shame or fear or guilt. And today, I'm going to be talking with Dr. Julia Myers about how parents can have money conversations that build confidence, maturity, and values instead of confusion or entitlement. Dr. Julia Myers is a TEDx speaker, mom of five, and the national expert on talking to kids about money. As a founder of Generational Wisdom, Julia helps families have the conversations that actually launch financially mature, grounded kids. If you've ever lain awake wondering whether you're spoiling them, this is the conversation you don't want to miss. Welcome, Julia.
Hello. And this will be such a great conversation because we're not going to talk numbers at all. So even though it says doctor and I'm a pharmacist and I count in my previous life, we're not going to do any numbers at all. So you're off the hook if you think this is a math conversation.
Great. Well, that's great because most of my conversations on here are not math conversations. They're all about how money and personal finance topics tie to real life. So this is very fitting because I can't tell you how many people ask me, how do I teach my kids about money? How do I help them learn about how they are emotionally attached to money? All those things. So I am really looking for this conversation. And let's start with your story. You said you were a pharmacist. How do you become to an expert in talking to kids about money?
I think that we all have those moments in life where we think we've got everything going for us. We are box checkers. We've done the things, we've set everything up. And then sometimes life has the way of throwing something at you that you didn't see coming. And for me, that was while I was sitting at my desk as a director of pharmacy at an academic medical center, running a big team, lots of millions of dollars on the P&L. And all of a sudden, the right side of my vision is blurry. I'm blinking a few times and the curtain closes on that right side and it just kind of goes black. And as a pharmacist, I know the warnings. If you experience a sudden vision change or loss of vision, call your doctor right away. Well, I just was like, okay, this is annoying. We're going to fix this. But what happened was I had a spontaneous retinal detachment. Normally, that's an urgent procedure, but not life-threatening or life-altering. But I'm not normal. I don't do life normal. Probably you don't either. And it ended up that I needed 5 surgeries over 18 months to try to get my vision back. And we weren't ever able to do that. So I'm only looking at you with this eye. So if you're watching, that would be why you might not have exact eye contact with me. And it was in that moment, going through those surgeries, when someone was reading to me a form that was about how clearly and confidently can your family articulate your wishes, I was like, oh boy, I've checked my boxes, but I don't know that I've built boxes for them or that I can confidently say they are ready to be blessed by what could be coming to them instead of just burdened. And so that was that moment that I said, I want to do things differently. I want to bring the kids along for the journey today, not someday. Because we've all done the wills and maybe the trusts or the states. That's the someday conversation. But what about right now when life throws you that thing you didn't see coming? That is the genesis for what I want my kids to have. That's not just generational wealth, but the wisdom to manage it. So that's why I pivoted and said, if my eyes don't work, I can be a speaker. I can let my light shine and help people in different ways. I used to help people with their medications. Nobody wants a one-eyed pharmacist is the joke. And now I help them with their money mindset. And so that is the pivot and the genesis of why I founded Generational Wisdom.
Such a great story. Obviously there's some tragedy in your story too, but it's such a great story because you take something that happens in life that just completely pivots you and you make something awesome out of it. So I love that. Now, you're a mom of 5, right? So I think that alone is a feat in itself. But talk about how your own parenting experiences shape the way you think about money conversations, because I think there's a lot of that to it also.
Oh, right. So we are a blended family. And so before COVID, we kind of blended, and the youngest now is 10 and the oldest is 22. So that means I've got Gen Z and Gen Alpha living at home. And even just within the different ways that the kids experienced, a pandemic, and how they think about life and things before AI and things after AI has absolutely changed lots of conversations at home. And for me, I realized I was kind of the problem when I started with my money story. I was wanting them to do things exactly the same way that I had done it. And as a parent, we all know our kids do things to the beat of their own drum. And when there are 5 kids, so girls are the Oreo cookie and the 3 boys are in the middle, everybody has not only a different personality and a different strength, but in a blended family, different backgrounds and exposures to money. And I realized very quickly that there were conversations we need to have that maybe other people are avoiding, because that's what I did growing up, was kind of avoid the conversation. Or it was we both work, my husband and I, both pharmacists, and then you just go into that shame guilt cycle of you're always at work, so let's just buy the stuff. And then we want our kids to have it better than we did. And so for me, I think it starts with understanding the money story you're telling yourself, and then identifying what is shaping that. What are the things maybe that are traditional that you really like from your childhood? And then what are those things that you're like, I don't want to ever save Cool Whip containers with mismatched lids ever again. So that would be maybe where you'd start when you're thinking about the kids. It actually is, what's your own relationship with money? And then we can transition into, what do we want that story to be for our kids?
Yeah. And I think that the stories that our kids have about money are so different than our stories. And so when we do try to teach them, we try to teach them from our experience, but their experience is not the same. And I think that a lot of parents, when they start to have these conversations, definitely recognize that tension, right? And also, like you said, they want to give their kids a good life. They want to have the kids' life be better than their own life was. But they also don't want to accidentally raise kids who are disconnected from effort or gratitude and be entitled, right? We don't want that. So tell me about the biggest money messages that kids pick up without parents even realizing it.
Okay, so a story when I was working with a group of elementary students, and I asked them, what is money and where does it come from? Kind of a basic question, but it was not meant to be a trick question. And they were saying, well, it comes from the bank, or it comes from a job, or it comes from, like kids knew that it came from somewhere. And then I asked the adults in the back that were supervising these elementary kids, I'm like, where does money come from? And what is it for? And they were like, debt, stress, bills, taxes. It jumped from being a transactional tool to a emotional baggage.
Yeah.
And there's some point in every young person's life that it pivots. And so I think step 1 is realizing there will be a shift in a relationship with money in the way that we are shifting and developing our independence. When we realize that money has to come from something we are creating and not just something we are receiving. And when you start to create it, there's a lot of messages that can pop up. And to your point, what we learned growing up, is all that we had. And I want to call out that that's the intention that we have, is to do better than what we had growing up. Well, thank goodness that it's going to be easier, because it wasn't until the 70s, right, that women could get bank accounts or mortgages. 1965 is when the first ATMs came out. So I'm going to bust the myth that says, well, I didn't learn about it growing up, so I'm not equipped to teach my kids about it. If there was a manual to parenting, A, it would be a bestseller, but B, it would be outdated. Because when it comes to money, how we transact with money is so very different. For example, if I asked you, how would you pay for something? What would you do? Like if you had to show me with a hand gesture, how would you pay me for something?
I'm going to show you with a hand gesture.
Yeah. What would you do?
I would just hold out my hand like open, like here's my money,
Okay.
right? Here it is.
So I've done that exercise in so many different rooms. Some people reached behind their pocket and grabbed their wallet. Some people open what they call a checkbook. Who knew what checks were? Some people grab their phone and just tap it. And some people just point to their watch. So just think in one room, in 4 different generations, how we transact with money is so very different. And so those would be the examples of what the world is teaching our kids about money, even if we as parents aren't intentionally saying, here's how you pay for something. That the world right. shapes the influences, whether you like it or not. That's the scary part, but that's also the blessing and the silver lining is they are getting their most influential behaviors from you as the parents and that nuclear family.
And I think this is where the human side of money is so prevalent. Just the different ways that people would say they would pay you shows that human side already. Like we're all doing something different to explain how we would do that. And teaching our kids facts about saving, spending, and giving, not only are they listening to that and understanding that, but they're also absorbing our emotions, our tone, our stress, all the stuff that we attach to money. And so a lot of times we unintentionally pass down our money stories to our children that weren't even theirs to carry in the first place. I think you have something called a family belief box. Tell us about that.
Okay. So 2 things to kind of set the stage. When you were a kid and you were going to school, your parents packed your lunch. Your parents packed your backpack. You didn't know anything different. If your sandwich was cut diagonal or halfway, or you got school lunch, that's kind of all you knew. And then there's this magic transition that you are a young adult as a teenager, and you start to kind of realize I'm my own person. Maybe I have my own preferences, and maybe I don't want the Lisa Frank backpack anymore. And maybe I want just something else instead. And so I like to call it the belief box. When you're younger, by default, is packed by your parents. But as you transition into young adulthood, you get to decide, is that what you believe about money? And so sometimes that means you get to pack your own lunch. You get to pack your own backpack. How are you showing up specifically around those relationships that are, what's it mean to feel in a relationship with debt? Some people carry a lot of stress and trauma because they're like, I want to do the opposite of what my parents had. Or they're never exposed to it at all. They never had access to dessert in the hot lunch line. And all of a sudden now they're like, I get to have dessert first whenever I go to college and have a meal plan. And so as a parent, I think it's important that we cover the core things that are financial literacy. We don't want to rely on the school to teach them everything about money. 32 out of 50 states require it. Great, check the box. We know how well school does with required education. Similar to sexual education and sexual health, and the talk about reproduction can be not a one-time conversation, but an ongoing conversation at age-appropriate levels. So as the kids start to pack their own beliefs, it's okay to ask their thoughts or their opinions around, well, what do you think pays for the house that we have? Or when I go to work, this is why, this is the trade-off. And so there's some realities there that if we're packing their backpacks all the way till they go to college and all of a sudden they're just an adult and they've never packed a backpack before, it's not that they're entitled. It's not that they only want the dessert first. It's they don't know any differently. And so the best time to start transitioning some of these beliefs is going to be at the everyday micro moments. It's not a lifestyle or magically at 16, something happens and they can drive. Oh no, I've launched 2.5 drivers. And let me tell you, there's no age that ever prepares you for them to take the road or that first set of keys. And yet we've got to create those skills that they know how to pack their own belief box, their own belief backpack. What do they believe is possible? Because your money story is either your limit or it's your leverage. And so, how many of us have heard of people entering young adulthood and they've received NIL money or they've won the lottery? And that money story could limit them if they're like, well, I came from poverty, and so I'm going to have everything I never had, and then it's all gone.
Yeah.
Or that money story can become your leverage to say, that was what it was, and I'm going to change the trajectory of my family tree and my legacy, and I'm going to do things differently. That's the power of what a parent can do, not because you pack their backpack for them or their belief box, but because you teach them the skills to apply outside of the classroom, to apply outside of the home, because that's what we all want, right? As parents, is for kids to make wise decisions when we're not around and watching.
So if a parent is thinking, I have no idea what messages my kids are picking up from me, where do they start paying attention to that part before they even get to the belief box and helping their child change their beliefs? How do they realize what beliefs they're sending, what messages they're sending?
I like to start with asking questions, but then allowing them to answer and going a little bit deeper. And so sometimes it can be very open ended, not a very like theoretical conversation, but a very like practical of how much do you think that costs? Why or why not? So there's the tactical side, right? Of like how much things in real life cost, why or why not? But then there's also the, do you think it was worth it? And then when that is the more important conversation, because as they're able to decide what worth is to them, they're able to decide, I like this more than that. And one example would be that I always like to give is kids are prioritizing before we even realize it. And money comes down to a limited resource. No matter how much you have, you're always budgeting it. You're always rationing it and telling it where to go. Kids and devices do the same thing. Kids have a few outlets, one charger if you're lucky, because in our family, we all have our own washi tape labeled chargers, and I still can't find mine or anybody else's for that matter. They're able to decide, okay, if I want to charge this device or is it that one? And learning those trade offs. So in the everyday moments, don't make it about money. Don't make it about we can't afford this or we can't afford that or that's not in the budget. Make it about the skill and the lesson underneath. How did you decide what was more important? Or when you were deciding what you wanted to eat, how did you decide? When you decided how much time you thought you needed to get ready in the morning. I love relating money back to time. Things that kids can understand as early as the age of like 2 or 3. That is a question I get a lot, is how soon can I start? Because then you've got, like the ones that are counting and we're like, oh, if they can count, can they do money? I like to rephrase it and say, can they share? When do they learn sharing? And when do they learn that everything in the world isn't for them to just consume? If I can teach gratitude early and I can plant some of those seeds around, not all of this is mine, and things can continue to come to me and then go from me, that is a concept that then carries it forward at all the different ages. So it's never too early, but it's also never too late because it's an adulting skill, whether we like it or not, that we are talking with kids about money. So practically find that small thing that then can tie back to what do you value and what's important. Kids have their own opinions. All you got to do is ask and then say, tell me more. What really? What else? And there's no right or wrong answer when they are establishing what's important to them. And think of how powerful that can be as then they enter the world of social media where they're deciding what's important to them instead of them being told, this is what the world says is important. And you're able to kind of challenge and question.
Yeah, I always have the conversation about the idea is if you say yes to this now, you're going to say no to this later. If you say no to this now, you'll be able to say yes to this later. And that works with time, that works with money, that works with so many different things. And it's a lot of what you're explaining here is all about that. It's choosing what you value, right? Do you value this more or that more? So you talk about raising grounded kids in an entitled world. I think we all kind of know what entitled means, maybe, but you could explain that, but also tell us what grounded means to you.
Great question. And grounded means that they are in a place of making wise choices. They are in a place where they can look around and say, what I have meets my needs. It's not that they don't want more. We all want more, right? We all want that next level of whatever it is that we are put on this earth for and to enjoy. Grounded also means that they can realize everyone around them doesn't always have that either. And when it comes to money, there's a difference that we talk about a lot in the rich versus wealthy conversation. The rich is what you can measure. It can go up, it can go down, you can earn it, you can lose it. And grounded is always remembering not just where you came from, but that you're in this place and it's a place that has more than somebody else. And you're also in this place that will always have less than somebody else. And that's okay. It's not a good or bad. It's not a judgment call of rich people are bad or rich people are good. It's just grounded means you're aware of the sacrifice it took to get whatever you have, whether it was through ancestors, and we just celebrated Independence Day and all these things. Like there's so much that they can't quite comprehend, but they know that it wasn't because they were born on this world to receive everything just for them. It's to be grounded in that sense of, okay, now they are going to pass on some additional value. It doesn't have to be money, but everyone has that purpose. And if I can have my kids find that purpose and they can walk in alignment with that, to me, that's grounded. Entitled is the just bank of mom and dad never closes. Entitled is the you've set a boundary, but they keep asking and asking and asking, and you're like, okay, fine. So I like to say we want to shift it from being entitled, and it's so easy to spot it in other people's kids. It's really hard to see it in our own kids. And so often that's the hardest part, is realizing we kind of enabled that behavior in the first place. So if I can shift that entitlement to being empowered, if I can transition the ownership of the decision, instead of being the bank of mom and dad, ask them, transition it. If they're entitled, okay, what are you willing to do to work for it? How do you want to spend your money to buy that next thing or upgrade to the next thing? Or, yeah, we'll cover the first iPad screen, but after that, you've got to pay for it. So setting expectations and then passing on that ownership decision is a huge way to kind of, to me, help them stay grounded. Doesn't mean you're not grateful. It very much means you're grateful, but it also means you're acknowledging that here in America, you're listening to this podcast, you have a place of privilege that a lot of the world does not have. And how do I continue to remind them that this is blessing, not just for us to consume, but for us to help create and bless others too? That's kind of the abundance mindset that underlies grounded.
Yeah. And empowerment is such a great way to reframe that, because a lot of parents hear entitlement and immediately think that they need to just get stricter and they need to stop it and they need to put boundaries in. But empowering is a different way to approach it. That would be better, because it would be not only putting those boundaries there in a different way, but also better lessons, right? Because it's not framed around shame, like, you shouldn't be doing this and you're entitled and shaming them. It's more like, hey, okay, this is where we are. And let's talk about how we can reframe this and empower and not make you, but help you to make better choices and understand values and limits and responsibility. So I think that's a really great way to think about it.
It's so important because as a parent, going back to that intentionality, the intention is to give them a better life. And yet that impact means we might be robbing them of some of those lessons that shaped how we grew in our strengths and in our character. It was through the hard. It wasn't because everything was handed to us. It was because we grew through hard. And that's the tricky part as a parent, is to decide how much is supporting them versus how much is like enabling them. And that's a question that I think each family, each person needs to think about and talk about. I think Dave Ramsey does it really well, that says, I am here, but I am not going to make it so comfortable that you're living in a hammock at home. You are going to have a place to land. Valerie Burton says you as a support system, as a parent, your job is to be that thick mattress pad that they can fall and bounce off of. Not all kids have a mattress pad and they just are on concrete, and that's hard. And maybe some of us have had those experiences, right? Where we didn't have somebody to come save us or pay that debt off, and it just kind of continued to accumulate. Whatever that story is, what does it look like to be a mattress, not a hammock, is what I like to say to parents. And usually we have a tendency towards one or the other. And I would say try to land that pendulum on the side of discomfort that is more in the middle. So if you're overly strict, let's land that pendulum a little more lenient, a little more risk tolerant. And if you're overly risk tolerant and you're just like, do whatever you need, I'll bail you out, let's pull it back a little bit more to neutral to have a little bit more accountability.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about the belief box. Do you have any other tools that are similar to that you can talk about?
Yes. So there are several tools that I have, and I would ask each family that has a will, that has some sort of a plan for someday, to ask their question, do I have a plan for today? Not of what's going to happen and all the decisions, but like right now, do I have a way that I know written down that we all agree upon of how do I make decisions? How do I say yes or how do I say no? Just like what you said, everything's a trade-off. And when you're able to, as a family, decide this is what we value, this is what matters to us, you're able to point to not dad said no, mom said yes, but as a family, we really value, which means we just make decisions in this way. I'll give you an example. My family loves experiences. So whenever we travel, we are doing the excursions. We are doing the things. What we say no to are the tchotchkes, are the things, are the souvenirs, are the stuffies, are the magnets, or the whatever. And that is a clear thing that we've set up, not because we can't afford it, but because we are making decisions in alignment with what's most important to us. So if you don't have a way that you make decisions, let's get one. Just like at work, you have a mission, a vision, a value statement. Get one for your family. Get one that everybody can be part of, have a conversation around, and then you can really say, this is who we are as a family. And then when they're outside of the house or you're not in the room, that would be the biggest test of when they're making those wise decisions. Because you can point it back to, okay, you went out with your friends. How did that align with what we value as a family? And then they are now able to say, hey, when I'm on my own, I can have different values, but right now while you're in this family, this is how we spend our money, our time, and our attention. So get super clear on what's most important, because your schedule or your budget will already tell you what you're telling your kids is important. But if that's not what you really value, there's a gap there. And that would be some work to kind of think about is how do I make choices that are more in alignment?
Yeah. Okay, so a lot of the talk that we've had today is about a lot of change, right? And so it's going to take time and effort and a lot of introspection too at the same time to get those things started. But for someone who wants a really simple version of something they could do like this week to get started, what would that be?
I think going to your kids, age appropriate, is an important step here, and sharing a story. It doesn't have to be something you're teaching them. It doesn't have to be a lesson you've prepared. It is just a story from your childhood. Maybe it's your first money memory. Be like, hey, can I tell you a story? I want to tell you about the first time I had $100 bill in my hand. Or I want to tell you about the first time that I had to get a job and I didn't know what I was doing. Whatever it is, normalizes that money is a conversation built in story. There's no wrong answer when you're telling a story. And every story is usually not happily ever after. Every story usually has a lesson. And then when you've started with that story, continue the conversation. Turn it around. Open that dialogue. This is a long process. And let me tell you, if you try and like lay it all on your teenagers, they will roll their eyes and be like, how quickly can this phase be over? You know? And give yourself some grace that it might be conversations you want to have with your partner. Do they know what your first money story is? Do your kids know what it was like to have that very first paycheck that went to paying for diapers instead of whatever else it was before kids? Yeah. Sharing stories removes some of the like trepidation. It removes some of the anxiety or some of the shame, because you're able to say, here's what I learned. I don't want to do that again. And then you're coming from a place of a storyteller and not a place of a teacher of, I've got it all figured out. Because let me tell you, I do not have it all figured out. So I wouldn't expect anybody else to do the same. I'll also say on the other side of that is you'll never share enough stories to be ready for every situation. So knowing that this journey is like trying to read every single book that's ever been written. It's not possible. It's not because you're not an amazing parent. It's because that's just not how it works. And so at some point, you'll have to decide, what are the most important books or what are the most important lessons I want my kids to have before they launch? And I'll share a story that I wanted my daughter to know the power of a matching contribution. So when she turned 16, she had saved up quite a bit of money for a car. We matched it. And I thought that was great. That's what a lot of parents do, right? Is get some skin in the game. So she found it. She took care of everything. And I said, okay, now we're going to go and get it registered and all of the things. We get to the DMV and she looks around. Where's the fast pass line? And I said, the fast pass line? She goes, yeah, I've never had to wait in a line this long and I don't have time for this. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I've created an entitled little monster. But then I had to remember the lesson I was teaching, we accomplished that. But it was such a great reminder that there are sometimes things that we are teaching our kids and she'd never had to wait in a line. We always had fast passes or TSA pre-check or lounges or early boarding for airplanes, whatever it was, she's never had to wait. And so that was a great opportunity to say, hey, you're right. When that's an option, we value our time and that's how we prioritize. And then other times, this is just adulting in life. And I'm so glad you're learning this lesson right now. And she's like, can you do this for me? I'm like, I cannot, but I will stand here with you in the DMV line for as long as it takes for you to do this skill. So both ends can be true of, I don't know where to start, but also realizing you'll never cover everything. Right. Your goal is to launch them with confidence. I have successfully launched 2 off of payroll. They are financially independent. They are on their own. So when my phone rings, my first thought isn't, oh no, they need money. How many parents have that when their kids are young adults, right? My first thought is, okay, what's up? What's going on? And the phone calls have transitioned from, how do I use coin laundry? Normally I just tap and go. It said laundry's included. I'm like, no, that's what quarters are for. Where do I find quarters? Those are the conversations it starts with to, hey, I tapped somebody in the parking lot. We exchanged information. My emergency fund is covering the deductible, but I wanted to let you know that I'm okay. And here's where I'm stuck. Yeah. Like that to me is that successful launching journey. It's not that you've solved all the problems for them. It's that they have the skills to be able to do it themselves. And it starts with that very first story of something you learned that you can pass on to them.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, tell us who needs to find you and how they can find you.
So if you are a parent, this works best while your kids are still at home. I like to say trapped with you in the car. They rely on you to be their Uber and they do not tip or rate you and usually will talk very disrespectfully to you. So that is the ideal parent that I work with. You can find me at Julia Myers, Myers. I say that's the East Coast spelling, juliamyers.com. And I've got some great conversation starters as well as a say this, not that for any age of kids. And let me tell you, I didn't use AI to create that guide. That's real school hard knocks. So when your kids say, are we rich? Don't say what I said. Grab the guide and say something else instead. When the kids say, well, you can buy it, don't say, no, and then just drop it. Do something different. And so I share from personal experience because those are the moments that catch you off guard. And if you're that parent, you will get these questions kind of like the birds and the bees we talked about earlier, you'll get those questions, and it's okay to have a wrong answer. And it's also okay to go back and revisit. But that's a guide and a resource that I put together that I think will bless anybody that is in this season of talking to their kids about money. And then if you're a child of aging parents, these conversations get reversed. You get to talk to your parents and you get to have these different generational scripts. You can ask them their money stories and what drove them to have a bank account or have a relationship with debt or not have debt at all. It's okay to ask your parents about money, but it's most important that you are passing on those healthy conversations to your kids. And you can do that by finding me at juliamyers.com.
Thanks so much, Julia. I will put all the links in the show notes. It's wonderful to have you here. This is a great conversation, and I appreciate you spending your time with us.
Thank you so much.
And for those of you still listening, thank you for listening to the end. Here's the closing nugget for you. Raising kids who are confident with money is not about having one perfect conversation or getting every decision right. It's about paying attention to the messages that they already are receiving and choosing little by little, and to make those messages more honest, grounded, and values-based.